you all for coming.
I want to introduce you to our guests. This is Pam and Michael, and they're with Frontier Wealth Strategies, and they're a different kind of planner than many.
But one of the things that when I left MetLife is that I wanted to be independent. I wanted to provide totally unbiased advice and work as a fiduciary for my clients. And so I became a certified financial planner. We don't have any ties to banks, insurance companies, or investment firms.
We are not beholden to anybody, so we can really step back and take a big, broad look at what are available for that client and their specific needs to make sure that we give them all those options so they can make a good, informed decision about what best suits them.
We have to do what's best for clients at all times. So
It's about their interest, not ours.
the frugal ones, where they're just saving, you know. And we sometimes get to a situation where we have to tell you have to spend more money because otherwise you will die very rich. Your kids will love you, but you know you are just saving for a future that might not happen.
That's a good conversation.
I wish I was your client.
Those are
Yeah.
ones where you're
I've had both
saying
those
you're spending way
conversations.
too much and you need to ratchet down and they're looking at you like you've got 5 heads and you're going, okay. You know, we need to wrap it in, but the other ones, you know, you've got to go spend it or you've got to give it away. You've got to be more philanthropic so that the tax man, I had a conversation with a very high net worth individual and I said, she goes, I'm tired of paying these taxes. I said, great, pick your favorite charity. And she goes, why? And I said, because you're writing a check regardless.
Right.
So let's pick who you want to give it to.
Well, and that's something also that a lot of people don't think about. They think tax is like a necessary evil and it's just something that's going to happen whether or not they do anything, but you really can control how taxes affect you. And if it's 25-30% of your life or of all your earned money, like it is not just something that you can ignore if you really want to be responsible with your money. It's a huge chunk of it. And if, like Michael said, it's not what you earn, it's what you keep, you got to think about that chunk of it. And one of the big topics we're going to talk about today is one method for saving money on taxes. It's called a conservation easement. You might have heard of it. A lot of people would immediately stand up and kind of badmouth it and say like, oh, it's too good to be true, don't do it. And again, that kind of lends this air of mystery that this is something that only people with teams who manage their money are able to take advantage of. But you know, we want to kind of let people know about things like this that are available to like normal everyday people. Conservation easement. Michael, you introduced it to us as a tax mitigation strategy.
It's one of those that a little known strategy that's actually been around since 1980. It was really meant for wealthy people to donate land because the government can't afford to go out and buy land to preserve it. So they wanted to incentivize private investors to do that.
I think I might be able to simplify it a bit for people who have no context for that conservation donation. You own a piece of land and you know you don't want to develop it. Say you're a farmer. You don't want to develop it. You don't want anyone to develop it. Your kids, you don't want some corporation to come in 10 years, buy it and put up a housing development because you know you want that legacy or your area to be like that, or you love the red-bellied frog that you know is endangered on your property. Like you can preserve your land by donating it to a land trust or something. You keep the ownership of the land, but you just donate the uses of that land beyond the rural uses. Like you say, like I will give up my right to do oil drilling here. I will give up my right to do multi-unit housing. I will give up my right to do these kinds of things that they want to prohibit. So they keep ownership of the land. They just sign what's called an easement to this land trust that promises that this land will not be developed in these ways. So by surrendering that value, you get a write-off of that value. So even though you still own the land, if you had developed it for oil drilling, or if you were going to, let's say you would have made $1 million oil drilling, you get a write-off of that $1 million because you didn't drill oil.
I just want to caveat to that though, it's into perpetuity. It needs to, that idea that you're going to, it's permanent. It's permanent from your life to the next lifetime and on into perpetuity.
So while you retain ownership, it might compromise the resale value, because what if the best resale value you would have gotten by selling it to an oil driller and you can't? So you surrender that possible value, but the tax write-off in many cases, if you know that you want to keep that land in the family or keep that area rural, then you still get to take a tax write-off. and nothing changes for
Yeah,
you.
and-
You just
and-
get a chunk of
And
money.
that's really kind of the essence of conservation easement is that you give up that future profit, but the tax code will allow you to take, in a very technical term, the present value of the future profit that you're giving up. So think of it this way, that if you, in your family, you had a very precious painting that you inherited from your grandparents, they bought it for a very small amount, but it has attained a very high value. If you're to donate that to a local art museum, the tax write-off you can do is not what your grandparents paid for that, but it's what the actual value is today. And that's kind of the same thing with conservation easement, is where they look at that as saying the future value of that piece of property, we will allow you to take that as a write-off.
So it's little cash out, but a lot of tax benefit in.
Yes.
So it's a
Yeah.
donation that,
It's a charitable
Easier.
donation, absolutely, to do that. But at the same time, you are actually preserving land that has some natural beauty as well. So the people that have taken most advantage of that are the likes of Ted Turner, where he owns over 500,000 acres in Montana. Every year he basically put a conservation easement on a slice of that. So he's now down to 450,000 that he has. He has donated 50,000. Now he doesn't mean he doesn't have access to his land. He actually has full access to it because he's farming that land. The buffaloes that you guys might have heard about that he's raising. He still does that, but he doesn't want anyone to build on his property. And then about 8-9 years ago, what happened was that some investment companies say, hey, we have this great tax strategy that we can really introduce to private investors, because as a law at that point was really for the top 1% of the 1%ers. So what these investment companies did, they said, well, we want to take it to really the top 10% income earners and do it that way. So if we develop a flow-through corporation, like a limited partnership, they can't take advantage of the tax breaks, but the investors can.
And I just want to clarify, like, you don't have to be the landowner of the land that's being conserved. You're actually using them to get into part of that ownership.
Yeah, and that's what the investment companies, that they that's their expertise. They go out and find the land for the investors, and then they put the conservation easement on it. It's a whole turnkey project, basically. They find the landowners that want to sell for one reason or the other, and then they basically put everything in place to do that for the investors to get in and invest into these programs.
so it's kind of like, I imagine it being almost like a mutual fund or something. It makes it accessible to small-time investors to get a lot of stocks, one-stop shop kind of. Like, this is kind of syndicating or bundling the opportunity to get in on this conservation easement by selling shares of a
Yeah,
big
that you-
piece
Right.
of property.
It's shares of one property though.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah. So that's kind of how it makes it accessible to us. The numbers might not be realistic, but let's say there was a $100,000 piece of property that a syndicator, is that the right term? The
Yes.
syndicator would buy, and they would sell shares of that. So if you put $25,000 in, you own 25% of that $100,000 piece of land. But if it were to be oil drilled, and the syndicator I believe you work with does have a background in oil drilling, like that value, if they used it for that kind of intense profit making, it's $1 million piece of land. So when you sign that as a conservation easement, you get the write-off of your share of $1 million. So you bought a quarter of that 100,000, but you're getting the write-off of a quarter of $1 million.
But it,
25% of the
sorry.
million.
Yeah.
It's a one-time write-off, it's not a
Yes.
residual.
Correct.
So every year you would need to
Yes.
find an investment. So instead of writing a check to the IRS for $25,000, you're writing the check to an investment, and in return deducting the full value of the profit from that investment
Yeah.
off of your taxes.
Yeah.
So you would also have to have enough taxes to write off.
Correct.
Yes.
Absolutely. So
Yeah,
in
this
general,
is not
yeah.
It's
a
not-
small gain. This is definitely
Yeah.
someone who has
Yeah.
a high net income stream that is looking for,
So just to clarify, so that future value that you're writing off, that's a one-time
Mhm.
write-off for a
Yes.
year.
Yes.
It does not carry over.
No,
Well-
it
Does.
can carry it forward.
How?
It can.
But the.
So that's different then. So it's a one-time write-off, but the.
Until it's used up, it could be
So
multiple
you, so
years.
if I had $1 million to write off,
Mhm.
that can carry over year to year to year to year
Mhm.
until that $1 million
Yes.
future value
Yes.
is depleted.
Up,
Right.
up to 15 years.
Okay.
So what, and what it's based on is that people that, say, like a farmer that might not have that income, but he has a farm that's worth millions, if he puts a conservation easement on it, he has like millions of dollars to write off, but his income does not justify that he can do that, because you can only do it up to 50% of your adjusted gross income. So that's why they put in place that you can do it up to 15 years. So it makes sense to do that. So there's a whole tax code, which is 170H, that specifies how you can do that. But yeah, it is up to 15 years. You
I
can
think
carry
that's a key factor, because
Mhm.
I know that
Yeah.
if, you know, if you could write off, you know, if you could put $25,000 into a fund like this instead of sending it off to the government,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And, you know, I could get 100,000 in write-off that can carry over year for 15 years.
Yeah.
I'm much more incentivized to do that
Yes.
than to write the check to the government. There's,
Yeah,
that's,
yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
Well, that's
you know,
just it.
that's a
Yes.
no-brainer.
Told
Yeah.
the client, you can write, you're writing a check, who do you wanna write it to?
Yeah.
You know, it goes to a charity or it goes to the IRS, so you just determine what you're
Yeah.
comfortable with.
And this isn't present value, this is potential value.
Well, the value's already been ascertained before you're involved in one of these syndicated properties. Evaluation has been done on the properties, and there's usually 2 to 3 that are done, and most of the syndicates that we work with are taking the lowest value of that high and best use of the property. They're not trying to raise any red flags, they're not going for broke on this. And so they'll take that lower number, and so you know what that value is already that's in place, and you know what that exchange is gonna be. So you have all the answers before you get involved in it, it's not a surprise. It's not, oh, they don't know what the value is, and I've just given them $25,000, I hope it's a good number, right?
Yeah.
That's not the way that these are supposed to work.
Yeah, the due diligence that goes into that, because it is considered an aggressive tax mitigation strategy, is quite thorough. Is that like Pam said, 2 valuations, go with the lowest one, with appraisers that know what they're doing. So it's not Uncle Bob, you know, that's saying, oh yeah, you know, it's worth whatever. IRS can challenge that. So when our due diligence is that we assume that all the investments that we do are going to be audited by the IRS. So we want to make sure that it's audit proof as much as possible. So that's one of them. The other thing is also that the programs we work with have a tax opinion from a law firm of tax specialists that basically said, yes, you have followed the law to the T. So that's another layer of that. And then the third layer is that a lot of the programs we deal with now actually have like an audit insurance that goes on top of that. So if there is an adverse ruling, and we have never had an adverse ruling, but if there is, and you incur any losses because of an IRS ruling in tax court, is that you would be made whole from the insurance policy. So think of it this way, you're one of maybe 100 investors. The insurance company, they are on the hook for everything. And my experience with insurance companies, they love receiving checks, they hate writing checks, you know. So I think that they also do a really good due diligence on top of that as well. So that's kind of the due diligence that we put into the programs.
Well, and this is just to show that like so many, like when I even just mentioned conservation easements, so many people just slam a door down and say, oh, that's shady, I read an article that it was shady and you're gonna get audited and that's too good to be true, you're selling a dream, this, that, and the other. And that is the kind of misinformation that is so frustrating, because people who don't have a team of advisors to steer them into the clear water and allow them to take advantage of these great programs, you know, the normal everyday person would just shy away from it and miss this opportunity. But if you go with the right partners, the right syndicator, the right advisor to get you in the right one, it's a fantastic deal. Like you said, like you can't argue with the math, and it's not even a risk when you know exactly from the beginning what the value is you're getting out of it. So I think the difference is it's not, gold is gold is gold, but like conservation easements, there's a big difference between bad ones and good ones, which is why, you wouldn't barrel into this, but with advisors that, have done their homework, with syndicators who have done their homework, it's something that it's really good to put the word out. I feel like it's one of those tricks that a lot of people miss out on.
It is, and again, like to your point, there are quite a few out there that are not done properly, they're not set up properly, there's verbiage inside of the documents that the IRS will pounce on and say, oh, you didn't dot that I or cross that T, right, we gotcha. And which can be really disheartening as an investor going, wait, I just got blown out of this and I have to pay penalties. The other thing is they have to have their permits, so all that factoring, all that information we've looked at first before we ever advise a client to look at one of those offerings, to make sure that they're not gonna have an issue, and we tell them they're probably gonna get audited, more than 99.9%, but that's okay because we understand that the parameters are put in there to protect you as an investor, that we should be able to roll right through with this.
I believe you told me that the IRS at one point, they say like, oh, we've audited the conservation easements of this syndicator before, like we already know that they're less problematic than others.
So we have now the stats out because Oren Hatz wrote a letter to the IRS and saying we want to hear what the breakdown is, because IRS cannot write laws, they can only enforce laws. And politically there's no will, neither from the Republicans and Democrats, and I joke, Republicans because you save on taxes, Democrats because you preserve nature. So it's one of those, the political will is just not there to change it, to change it. So Oren Hatz actually wrote put a request into the head of IRS to say, I want to hear what the numbers are when it comes to audits. And the reply back, and I have a copy of the letter, is basically that 16% of conservation easements are being audited. And from my sources that I have through client CPAs that have worked for this service, they basically said out of those 16% of programs that are being audited, 6 to 10 investors are being audited. Now, in our own experience, we've done probably about 30 of these programs, and we've had about 5 or 6 IRS reviews / audits. Nothing has ever been changed in these programs at all. The ones that IRS, again, going back to the letter, what they've gone after is where there's been egregious evaluations. They haven't followed the tax code as they were supposed to. And yes, of course, they are going to be picked out by the IRS. And we want them to be picked out because that means that the serious players will be left standing when the dust settles, basically.
And I think also you have to prove that you could actually develop it that way. Like if I bought something and donated it because, I'm not gonna put the shopping mall there that I could put there. Like I have no basis for building a shopping mall, but if you get the right syndicator, which actually can prove that there is a loss being taken by donating that property, that kind of
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
cleans the deal up.
a lot of them, ones we've done, have typically been mineral rights, like mining. And if you guys know anything about mining, it's typical, it leaves after 20, 25 years as a big hole in the ground, One of the programs we did was a beautiful mountain in West Virginia. There was coal in it. That could have been a coal mine, but we actually ended up preserving that. And the National Boy Scouts Jamboree is right next door. And they're the ones that are going to be the recipient of this beautiful mountain, where they can basically expand the property that they use, and now the Boy Scouts can actually use that instead of it just being totally ripped out and the river polluted because of the mining. So it's one of those that I feel really good about, that we actually saved this mountain, And yeah, the syndicator we work with, they actually have a mining operation, so if the investors wanted to mine it, they could. And they would receive the royalties for the next 20, 25 years. So a lifespan of a program like this is about 4 years because there's a 3-year look-back period from the IRS. And in year 4, the program is basically donated to the charity. At that time, then it's off your hands and you no longer get what's called a K1 for your taxes in that, because there's no value really at that point in the partnership. So instead of you getting a K1 in perpetuity, it's just wound down and then formally handed over to a charity at that time.
So are you buying a share in the land, or you're buying a share in the partnership that owns the land?
Yes, the partnership, yes.
Okay, very good. So you don't own any of the land. in theory, but on paper, the donation
Yeah.
value you get.
Yeah.
Who can really
It's
do this, 'cause
qualified.
obviously, yes.
So it's an accredited investor, which is, there's a couple ways to qualify. You as an individual have an income annually of 200,000, as a couple 300,000, or you have $1 million worth of investable assets, not counting your primary residence. So that's how you can qualify for this. For us to even start to have that conversation with you about, okay, let's consider this for you. We want to make sure that we've done that kind of qualification. Because not everybody's going to fit into that profile, but in this area, two-income family, very quickly, you can get into that arena very fast.
Well, and also, I appreciated something that you said, because it's, I mean, yeah, there's a couple months left in 2018. If you wanted to get it right off in this year, you could probably squeeze it in. But just knowing and being able to plan, like to have a chunk of cash, because you do have to put out 25,000 minimum or so cash that is not deductible. It's just an investment, correct? You have to
Well,
put that
it's
out to get the
categorized as
to
a
get the
chip, yeah.
return.
Exactly, yeah, you kind of wave goodbye to that investment because you know that that land is going to be donated. But the write-off you get in the K1 that comes back, so if it is 25,000 and then the K1 comes back as a charitable deduction of 125,000, if you're in the highest tax bracket, state and federal, you know, you're close to 50% anyway, so that means that 125,000 write-off becomes, you know, 62,500 that you actually net out in that way. So you look at it that way, it's like, okay, I'm waving goodbye to 25,000, but, you know, the tax saving net to me is 62,500. So really not a bad deal altogether. There's definitely an incentive for me as an investor or tax payer to do that. And that was the intention of the law all along, to really help preserve land, that they wanted to incentivize private individuals to do that.
So how long does the process take? Like, if, you know, I'm interested and I really, you know, I think as realtors, some year we could have good year, or even lenders or so forth, right? I mean, some years we could have a good commission payout and then another year not. So like, how soon should we plan to talk to you, and like, what does that process entail?
Yeah, so everything has to be done in the tax year. The tax year is a calendar year. So everything has to be wrapped up before December 31st. Now, if you call Pam and I on December 15th, it's going to be really tricky because the conservation easement will have to be certified in a courthouse. So we've had companies where they run around between Christmas and New Year and trying to find a courthouse. I mean, I heard of one company that, I mean, they were basically traveling to 4 states, you know, in order to find a courthouse where they could certify the conservation easement. So don't leave it this late. I have done it one time and I said I'm not going to do it again because it's really hard. Because also if your need is 100,000, you might only get 50,000 because everybody kind of wants to cram in at the end of the year. But I would say now is a good time. We've just closed our first program and we're opening up the second program. So it is a good time to do now, because if you say my need is 50,000, we can get you that 50,000 investment in there. Not a problem at all. But it gets hectic towards a year, and there's absolutely no doubt about it. Simply because of the legal requirements, everything has to be wrapped up by year end. You know, otherwise you go into next year, and it's not going to happen basically.
And how much more complex does it get if you have someone doing your taxes, and a CPA, and an investment advisor, and a banker that you talk to? How,
Yeah, no, we
how do you juggle all this?
definitely, because we know exactly what the write-off is going to be on the investment you're doing, we do want to talk to our clients, CPAs, and saying, what is the amount that makes sense for you to invest in? That if you have a need for 250,000, we can pretty much to the dollar amount find out what you need to invest in order to do that, so you don't have a carry forward, you know, if you want to do that. So sometimes I've had situations where clients have had a huge bonus, or they got a golden parachute when they left the job, and they say, you know what, I just want to, because of the 15-year carry forward, I just want to kind of take care of it now, because if the tax law changes, I'm grandfathered in, so I can get my write-off for the next many years. You know, I had one client that did that, you know, so we did about, I think it was $1.5 million in write-offs, so they're basically doing that. This year, well, it's 2017, they got 110,000 back, but they haven't invested anything. It was basically the carry forward where they did that. And they probably have another 2 or 3 years where they can do that, which was, by design, we did that. So if they change the tax law next year, they're grandfathered in, so that's what we did.
Yeah, I think that when you told us about, it was like they put out one chunk of money and then they got 6 figures back every year as a refund.
Oh, yeah,
On
this
that
one here is the
one
lowest, and they got
spend out.
110,000 back,
Is this
so
a proprietary product for your company only? or-
No,
it's not.
we're completely independent, we serve no one.
And
No
there's
one
several,
but the client, I mean, that's our personal objective. We don't want anybody to say, you're gonna sell this for us. It's like,
Mhm.
yeah, they call us a lot. We get
Yeah.
lots and lots of phone calls. Hey, we've got this, we've got that, can we talk to you? We're like, let me look you up first and find out what I know about you before I sit there and we'll break bread with you, because I don't wanna waste my time. And everyone's got something to sell. So, we really vet through a lot of different people. This conference that we just went to was very interesting to see how many conservation easements were there. And there's socially responsible conservation easements, there's historical, I mean, it's run the gamut there. And going and finding out what they're doing, how they're doing it, and then, kicking the tires and looking under the hood to say, so how exactly have you done all this? And then there's law firms out there that will review them, and so we'll go over and talk to them. So what can you tell me about them that the wholesaler's not telling me? And then, of course, we have our due diligence to go and read through the articles and make sure that we understand all that. So there's a lot of work, and there's no way that we would work for anybody and sell their product.
yeah, there are quite a few companies out there. I would say that there's probably about 5 really good ones. We only would work with 3 of them. The 4th one, because they're just too young, they're doing everything right, but they just don't have the track record. The 5th one, they do everything right. I like their program. Do not trust the CEO whatsoever. So I'm not going to work with a company, even though they have a great product, but the integrity is just not there from the CEO. That is, or could potentially be an accident waiting to happen, so I'm not going to go there.
See what I mean? We do a lot of due diligence.
Because they're on the hook. If they mess up for you,
Well, you're not gonna remember their names, you're only gonna remember our names. So
Yes,
if
exactly.
something goes wrong, you're gonna remember Michael and Pam, and so that's important to us, that our integrity of what we're doing and doing for the client and for you is first and foremost, and that we can sleep at night.
I actually want to bring up like a comment I got when I posted this event, and someone had made comment like, "Be wary of that," and I'm a CPA, and like I wouldn't
Yeah.
advise you to do that. Why would a CPA say that?
I think that it goes back to, I wasn't in this country back in the 80s, when the smoking mirrors happened, but there was a lot of CPAs that were creating all these companies that was nothing but a write-off. I mean, on paper it was a loss, but there was no actual business there. And a lot of CPAs did that, and it was great for their clients. They got these write-off. Well, IRS caught up to that and say, hey, wait a minute. These companies, I mean, it's a paper company. It's just on paper, and there's actually no product, no service. They don't do anything. They just generate a loss. It's not a genuine business. So the IRS went after the CPAs really, really hard, and a lot of CPAs lost their licenses and their livelihood, So, and they should have. I mean, it was just a scam, But it got so ingrained in CPAs that they're like, oh, I'm not going to recommend my clients anything, They like to look back, So when you sit down, we only have few days ago, most people filed, the people that filed for extensions, they did their taxes, and they were like, oh, you can put a few money into your retirement account. That's about it that they would do, They look back, and they don't look forward, where we look forward and saying, how can we help you with the taxes going forward? So the CPAs are very cautious about those kind of things. Also because they only read about the things that go wrong as well, that's the other thing.
Say, I had a CPA quote what's happening with how the IRS was really going to try and enforce 170H, and it was like scripture for him, and I said, and he goes, and there's a insurance on it too, and I said, that's a good thing. I said, how many insurance companies do you know who insure something that they're gonna have to write a check for? Oh, this is just, I can't even believe that you're even suggesting this, and I thought, okay, he, A, doesn't wanna be informed, B, he's seen something bad happen, he's just scared of it, or C, maybe he's uncomfortable that his returns that he's doing are gonna be audited. Because he says they're probably gonna get audited, and I said, yes, they probably will get audited.
Can I?
Yeah, absolutely.
He's projecting his own guilt, basically.
I don't know.
Well, so is it safe to say that if the investment gets audited, so does the rest of your life? So does the rest of your tax return?
Yes.
So while your investment may be legitimate, what else is going on? And that's what they're trying to avoid.
Yeah.
The risk in, sure, this sounds like a great thing and this is perfect and this checks out, but while the IRS is checking this out, oh, what are you doing over here?
Did you really donate all those clothes that are worth
Right.
$15,000?
And
It's
again,
more than,
the CPA has their name signed on it,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
they are probably saying, I wanna avoid having
Right.
any clients. And I think you had a client where the CPA fired the client when he said, if you invest in this, you're fired. And so the client went and found a new CPA.
Yeah, and you know, I like to interview CPAs when I got to refer them out. And one of the things that I always want to hear from a CPA is, and the quality of our work we do is that we assume that every tax return that we turn in is going to be audited by the IRS. And that's exactly the same approach that we take, you know, as well, because it is, if you don't want to be audited, there's probably something going on that you don't want. You're just basically playing, rolling the dice on your tax return that the IRS is not going to look at your tax return. That is not how we operate at all, so.
Sometimes it's taking a risk that forces people to
Yeah.
stay honest. I mean, it keeps people
Oh, yeah.
honest
Yeah.
if you know the spotlight's gonna be on, so that's probably a good way to vet all of your advisors.
No, absolutely.
And Livermore, the city of Livermore is huge on conservation easements. I don't know if everybody notices, but a lot of those grapevines that they have are conservation easements. That's exactly what they are. And I remember when the city made that determination and told everybody, if you're gonna develop land, you're also gonna have to do these conservation easements. And everybody kinda got upset at first, and then before you knew it, people were buying land, building houses, putting conservation easements on it on their own, and then getting the benefit on their own properties. And like you said,
No, and it's absolutely, I just took my son to college this year in New York, and it was one of those where I got talking to one of the other parents, and he was a developer. And what his biggest fear was actually a lot of cities, but mainly in the south where he was, they wanted to build up the city, and he's like, we're not going to have any parks. I want to be able to buy land and turn it into a city park. And so I said, hey, I know some people that can help you with that. You know, let me give you some references so you can talk to those conservation easement specialists, because they are the ones that can help you give that. Because he would be like, people want to just, you know, buy the land and family units or whatever, things like that on it, and you end up with absolutely no green areas in his city. It's horrible, you know. So he had started a charity that wanted to do that, but he couldn't really get the funding going. I said, well, I can help you with the companies that can make it attractive for you to do that, you know. So I basically hooked him up with 2 or 3 conservation easement companies and said, talk to them about that. They can guide you that way, because it's everybody appreciates that once it's there.
And I know that one story of some people can misuse conservation easements also, like golf courses. Like I was reading about someone in Virginia who was like, oh, we're buying a lot of golf courses. I can still, but we keep the rights to run a golf course, but we're never going to drill oil. But they still took the right off while they're making a profit on their golf course.
I mean, some of the egregious that CPAs might have read about, you know, when you turn the rough into a conservation easement, the IRS said, hey, wait a minute, this is a private golf club, it's not accessible to the public. I mean, they can't get any enjoyment of it. It's only for the members, they're going to overrule that, most likely.
And it's the rough, come on, who hangs out in the rough?
So, if it's in middle of the swamp,
You're never supposed to be in that spot.
if it's a tiny little island in the middle of the Everglades, in the middle of Alaska, things like that, IRS are probably going to overrule that, because it's not really accessible to the public. So, things like that. That again, it's part of the due diligence that we work with in helping that.
What was that story you told Denise and I the other about the winery? and-
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
so like you take, I don't know if it was Napa, but it could have been Napa, but basically what they were saying that you had this guy, he owned a farm and he wanted to turn part of it into a conservation easement. Then he said, oh, it could be developed as a vineyard, so he actually went ahead with the program and everything like that. And just like in Napa, they have at a certain grade, you can't grow vineyards anymore. Is that they're saying, no, you can't do that, and they had overlooked that. So the IRS came in, and when they did the audit, they're like, well, you're saying that the value of this is, you appraise it as if it was a working vineyard. Really, in reality, is that you can't because it's too steep a hill. So they basically threw it out, And those are the kind of things that, again, with the programs, we have the permits and the programs to be developed if the investors so choose to. So the IRS can't say, well, this is just something pipe dream that you're putting up there. No, we had, when you look at, the 500-page document that comes with it, you see all the development plans, you see the permits and things like that it can actually be developed.
So I know we ran a little late because we started a little late, but I think this is a great example of just how important it is to do your research, know that there's a lot of things under the surface and that are available that you just need to start the conversations, and whether it's for yourself or if you have clients. Like if you're a realtor, it's in your best interest to have your clients have as much money as they can to buy their next house or to, it's a form of survival. Like if you serve clients and you don't want to become a commodity and be replaced by an algorithm on the internet, you need to be able to think outside the box and really advise or introduce them to advisors like this who can make their entire financial profile look better. It helps everybody and builds a relationship of trust, and the rising tide lifts all boats.
Yeah, I just want to add to that with the new tax reform is that we call it the SALT, the state and local taxes, is that one of the things that people don't realize is that it's only the first 10,000 that you can actually write off. After that, you pay taxes with after-tax dollars. Personally, I think that's morally wrong, that we all live in an area where, your property taxes, if you buy a house, are very close to the 10,000 already, if not over. That
You're
means
buying it now, yeah.
exactly, if you're buying now, is that your property taxes are alone, I have clients that they're like, yeah, first 3 months, that's it, my 10,000 is gone, right? So it's one of those that then you start paying your California taxes with after-tax dollars. There's actually over 10 states that are in that boat right now where they're really being hurt with that, which has really spurred a lot of people to look at conservationism because they're like, man, I'm using that 10,000 in no time whatsoever. So I really got to look at how can I lower my taxes. And I think that for most people that have like ordinary like W-2 income and things like that, conservationism can be a very powerful tool for them to really help mitigating some of that tax pain. Because I think for all of our clients and most people in general is that the single biggest expense you have is taxes. We don't realize it because it comes out of our paycheck before we receive that, but that is the reality, It's not mortgage, it's not medical expenses, it's actually taxes. And if you think about it, like we said in the beginning, it's not how much you make, it's how much you keep. If you can help lowering your expenses and taxes being the biggest one of that probably can go a long way to really help your financial situation.